Hello everyone, I'm Professor Ozan Örmeci from Istanbul Kent University as the coordinator of International Political Academy, shortly known as UPA. We continue our interview series with international academics. Today we have a very distinguished guest from the United States. Professor Mark Meirowitz is a leading American expert who has been teaching at SUNY Maritime College in New York for many years. Mark's areas of expertise include Turkish politics, Turkish foreign policy, and Turkish-American relations as well. And he recently wrote an excellent chapter to our edited book on Turkish-American relations in the 21st century. So, Mark, hello, welcome to the program.
It's a tremendous pleasure and a privilege to be with you, even if we're not in person, which I hope, inshallah, we soon would be.
Why not? Thank you so much, Mark. It's our privilege. It's really hot in Istanbul. How's the weather in New York right now, Mark? It's early morning, I guess.
As they say in Turkish, çok zor. We had yesterday, but we had 108 degrees. I don't know what that is in Celsius, but it's probably approaching 28, 29. I didn't do the math, but very, very hot. So,
Summer season. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Mark, if you don't mind, let us start with the 2025 Israel-Iran crisis or Israel-Iran war. Turkey's response to this crisis, this unexpected crisis from our perspective, has been a bit cautious. Top Turkish officials, including President Erdogan himself and his foreign minister Hakan Fidan, have condemned Israel's aggressive policies, but on the other hand, they have refrained from using a strong language like in the past against Israel or United States. In the U.S., we know that there's this traditional support for Israel on every occasion. And of course, again, during this crisis, also in the media and in academia, I think the support for Israel was at the forefront. So when you assess this position over Israel and Iran crisis of two historical allies, do you see any differences or similarities? How do you interpret Turkey's positioning?
Well, I think you very astutely point out that the reaction of Turkey in this has been very, I would say, restrained, and the reason for that, I think, is that since the beginning of this situation, Turkey has been watching and waiting to see what would be the outcome of the situation. That we really didn't know. If you were sitting with me a week and a half ago, we wouldn't have predicted there'd be a ceasefire in place. I don't think so. Or that the United States would have bombed the three sites. It was very unclear what would happen. In fact, President Trump, as you recall, said, I'm going to give them 2 weeks. I'll give Iran 2 weeks to let me know what they want to do, if they want to have peace. And then the next day or two, he bombed the three sites. So from Turkey's point of view, to go back to that, and that's very interesting, is that Turkey's been watching and waiting to see how does it turn out. And why is that? Because, first of all, Turkey and Iran, let us say, we'll call it rivals for and competitors for regional and global influence. And the one thing that Turkey does not want is an unstable Iran or regime change in Iran, because if Iran collapses, you're going to end up with another Syria with refugees, and who is going to take the brunt of it? Turkey is going to take the brunt of it. And to segue to that, to me, there are many, many priorities for Turkey. One is resolving the Syria situation, in particular, to resolve the 3+, it's probably much more, million refugees, Syrian refugees in Turkey today, and having them be able to return back to Syria. And by an interesting, amazing, if you will, unpredictable developments, the Syrian regime of Assad was overtaken by al-Shara. And in many respects, that was the result, if you think about it, because Israel took out Hezbollah. Israel weakened Iran's defenses. Russia was distracted with Ukraine. So therefore, there was an opportunity for 25 to 30,000 jihadists to come and take over and overthrow Assad. this is the unpredictability. This is why we in international relations always wait day by day to see what is going to happen, because you cannot predict. It was something a diplomat once said, not a Turkish diplomat, but a diplomat from the region, that to be a scientist in this field is to be an expert in astrology, because we just don't know. So what happened was the Syrian regime was overthrown, and Turkey then had a big opportunity now to solve the Syria crisis, and even possibly to resolve the issue with the Syrian Kurds, which has been a major issue for Turkey. Now, what's very, very, and of course, the Turks were Turkish regime, President Erdogan, Fidan, and others, they were very instrumental in working with al-Shara in terms of his international diplomacy. He met al-Shara with Trump. So this is a whole big development. But what you must not forget are the domestic political concerns of President Erdogan, because he does want to, I think, maybe he says in his tweet, if God gives him the strength, he will run again for another term. But he cannot, because under the Constitution, he's term limited. And in order to be able to run again, he needs the votes. Please correct me if I'm wrong in my Turkish politics, but he needs the DEM party, the Kurdish party, in Turkey. So maybe, I say maybe, because Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House in America, always said all politics is local. So to me, the politics in Turkey is also local, because I think the existence and the future efficacy of the AK party is very much on Erdogan's mind too. So he wants to make sure to assure that future and be able to run again if he wants to run again, or to be able to appoint a successor. In order to do that, we see a peace process in place, amazingly proposed by the Meher Bacheli, which you would never, again, in a million years, if you went to Las Vegas and you made a bet, who would make a Kurdish Privilege Prizes? Would it be Erdogan? Would it be, anyone? And Bacheli, you would lose a million liras. Okay, so my point being, a lot of unpredictabilities here. So I think Turkey, is its leadership, both for domestic and international reasons, is watching and waiting how this turned out. And this is why Turkey did not jump right in. Of course, Turkey always offers to be mediator. It has that capacity. That function has gone a lot to Qatar, to Oman. But, Turkey is the key, power in the region. So I think that's on the Turkish side. And also for Turkish-U.S. relations, the main issue for President Erdogan and for Turkey is to resolve the S-400 issue, I call it a kerfuffle, the bump, the glitch, and to be able to have Turkey come back into the F-35 program and F-16s and future defense, because, Turkey is developing its own significant defense capability, but it does need the relationship with the United States. And so therefore, and in fact, they had a very good meeting. I think maybe we'll talk about that, but I think good meeting. President Trump has been very, very, I think, complimentary of President Erdogan. And in fact, during his first term, he invited President Erdogan to the Oval Office. He invited some senators to come in, tried to work out a discussion to see what he could do. That was all very, very, of course, United States did put sanctions on Turkey, but the reason why that occurred is because Congress mandated it under the NDAA, right? National Defense Authorization Act. It wasn't, and the sanctions that Trump put on were, again, all sanctions are punitive, but what I think the least in the menu in the restaurant of sanctions, these sanctions were not, the office of the Presidency of Defense. What office is this? In other words, it was more a symbolic, I think, gesture to say that to please Congress, which wanted more, and Trump did less. Okay, so right now, the potential for better relationship in Turkish-U.S. relations is there. And so therefore, Turkey's, I think, view is not to alienate the U.S., to watch the region, to watch Iran, see what's happening with it. And right now, there's a ceasefire. So I think that um, there are a lot of moving parts, and that from the point of view of the United States, again, it's Trump. I mean, when you say what is the United States point of view, it's really President Trump. And what is President Trump thinking? He doesn't want wars. He wants a ceasefire. And as far as you mentioned, the support of the United States for Israel, which maybe we'll talk about some more, my point would be there that President Trump was very critical of Israel recently, where he was quite, he used some very, let's just say, salty language to describe the fact that he had a ceasefire and that Israelis and Iranians were violating it. And so I think that, what we have is we're in a situation which is very, very unclear. We have a ceasefire. We don't know what the status of Iran's nuclear program is. There are a lot of imponderables, but hopefully we're moving in a period of peace.
Thank you, Mark. I got it. And as you mentioned, President Trump has been recently a bit critical of Israel also. But traditionally, we know that in U.S. foreign policy, especially towards Middle East, number one is about the security of Israel. And that's why maybe Iranian nuclear program is seen a very existential threat to America, to United States, and to Israel both. And in that sense, there are some scientific efforts also to understand, internalize why Israel is so influential over the US politics. But there are also a lot of conspiracy theories and maybe anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist approaches. Of course, we don't support such views. But other than this, how do you think, you referred to all politics is local, how do you think, Mark, Israel is so influential over the United States? Of course, there are sentimental reasons dating back to Holocaust, what we've seen as the greatest tragedy in modern times, of course, and we share the same feelings in Turkey and in Europe elsewhere. But other than this, how do you assess the relationship between Israel and US?
Well, one thing I should say to start off in terms of the film Desperate Hours, and which I've shown in my synagogue, a movie about the Turkish diplomats who rescued Jews in the Holocaust, heroic diplomats. This is a story that needs to be told. It's very important. So I think that underscores that. As far as the support for Israel is not just pure. Hold on one second. Hold on. Can we pause it? Okay. Can we? Yeah. Hold on. So.
Sure, Mark.
Did I just interrupt this?
No, please go on, Mark. It's
Can you edit it? Can you edit it?
Happens, no problem.
I'm sorry, that was my wife. All right. So anyway, I think that, first of all, about the existential threat, I think that threat is not just to Israel from Iran, but it's also to the United States, because, Iran is developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. And the chanting of death to America and death to Israel, I mean, you could take the position they don't mean it, but I think they really do. And if they do, then that means it's a danger to America. It's a danger to Israel, to the region, and also to Europe. I think the European leaders definitely perceived the danger of Iran rising up and getting nuclear weapons. Now, this is a big question for a big, big discussion. But to put it clearly, I think that Iran, it's perplexing that a country with such enormous energy resources needs to pursue a nuclear program, a peaceful nuclear program, and then bury it in mountains secretly, which are impervious even to the most significant ordinance in the world. So this is very perplexing. People don't understand this, and the rhetoric coming out of Iran, and we know that historically Iran has been responsible for the deaths of many, many Americans. The Khobar Towers, the barracks. I mean, you name it. So that it's not an imaginary threat. But when you talk about conspiracy theories, I think we should dismiss those because the support of the United States for a democratic country in the Middle East is a visceral support, and it is very deeply held in Congress. And I think that it's important to emphasize that. I think that what many analysts miss is that if you look at the relationship, it's, let's say, between Turkey and the United States, purely as between the leaders, and they have a good relationship. But Congress, and I think a lot of the diplomats, I've heard this myself over many years, have said to me, and I'm not going to say who said it, but who said it to me, Turkish diplomat, Congress. I'm spending my time working with Congress because Congress's views of Turkey are not positive. They're not positive because, and you want to ascribe it to the various lobbies. There are lobbies in Congress that have for many, many years been opposed to U.S. support for Turkey, U.S. defense support for Turkey, and so forth. So that is an issue that Turkish diplomacy, needs to address. And so that relationship does not just come out of the, out of the woodwork, out of the ground. Congress has had a deep support for Israel. Now, we do have some polarization on these issues because of the differences between Democrats and Republicans today. There's no question about it. And we have a very lively debate on this question. So I would not say that the support for Israel is automatic and that just it's constant. There's been a lot of debate about it. But at the basic, if you want to boil it down, it is a deeply held feeling of supporting Israel, which against all odds. Now, if you think about it a little bit, what were the odds? What were the odds that Israel would have taken out Hezbollah's leadership, would have destroyed, not now, but previously, Iran's defenses, would have also fought a war with Iran. Iran is a country with 95 million people with full military and missiles on and on. The fact that the Israeli people sit there and withstand I was talking to someone in Israel and they said we're in the shelter all the time. We're always running to the shelter. So, who would want to live like that? But they live like that. And the other point is, and just to explain, you have Israelis around the world, Ozan Hoja, who are actually not leaving Israel. They're going back there to fight. And I think it's very similar to the way in which Turks feel about Turkey. I want to say that because in my years of having had, and lucky to have friendships with wonderful Turks like yourself, Ozan Hoja, and others, the feeling of Turkey, of Turks about Turkey is a deeply held feeling about their nation, about their country, wherever they may be. And so the same feeling exists among the Israelis, sort of fighting against the underdog. They haven't been around a long time. And every single time, someone decides to say death to Israel, and attack Israel and try to destroy it. And so far, those enemies have not been successful. They'd be able to turn it around. But right now, where we sit today, we really don't know what the future holds. How does the future hold? Right? Ayatollah Khamenei says, hey, U.S., Israel, no, not much happening. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And, they didn't destroy us and we're still there. So, again, Trump's policy is no war. So that means he attacked military sites. What the significance of that attack is unknown. And now we sit here at the chess table and we try to figure out, Ozan Hoja and Mark are going to figure out what's the next chess piece. But the relationship in that chess game between the U.S. and Israel is very, very, very strong. And that will not change. Although, as I said, President Trump will get up and he will criticize Israel, and will American diplomats will criticize Israel. So I don't think it's unconditional. Let's put it that way. I don't think so.
Okay.
But it is very, very, very strong.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And I think all over the Middle East, there is general consensus about Iran shouldn't having any nuclear weapons. But when it comes to Gaza and the big humanitarian tragedy happening there for several months going on, I think the reactions against Israel and United States differ, including Turkey and some Arab countries also. So we are hoping that President Trump might come with a feasible solution about Gaza together with Israel. And lastly, Mark, of course, our expertise.
I did want to comment on that. In other words, I think that everybody wants peace, and we want the end to the Gaza crisis, no question about it. I'm happily, Ozan Hoja, you and I don't have the job to solve that one. It's a very, very thorny issue.
Yes.
But, again, just to be clear on it, Hamas, which is a proxy of Iran, attacked on October 7th and took hostages, and they should return the hostages. And I think that all the European powers and internationally, there's a feeling about that. And so Hamas is the problem, if you look at it that way. And I think that's how I look at it. And I think that when the Gaza situation ends, inshallah, hopefully soon, and the hostages are returned, and it is some resolution, the main issue is the humanitarian effort in Gaza to reconstruct and for the people of Gaza to live in peace, as President Trump says, to have a good life. And they can have a good life under the circumstances. And I totally agree with you. But again, it's Hamas that started the war, and took the hostages. And, we have to put an end to this, because the people who's suffering there are the people. The people are suffering, and they shouldn't have to suffer under that regime. So there has to be some way to solve it. That's what I think. I hope so. So far, no one has the magic answer to it, but it needs to answer, because the people are suffering, and that's very, very bad.
If Professor Mark, if the only problem is Hamas, then a Palestinian state might be recognized on the West Bank, because the control is not under Hamas. But I hope our American friends and experts will come with a solution. So, Mark, my last question will be about Turkish-American relations. We both mentioned the good chemistry between President Trump and President Erdogan, and they are strongmen. They like each other. They praise each other, although they had some disputes in the past. And they posed together at the Hague NATO summit recently. Turkey traditionally supports NATO's increasing defense spending plans. United States seems, is the leading country, and President Trump is very much focused on this proposal. So what we should expect, but we still have the S-400 crisis and F-16s, F-35s problem still not resolved between two historical allies. So in this coming years, President Trump and President Erdogan will be there for some while, at least for several years. What we should expect from Turkish-American relations? Could there be a maybe official visit? And can we make a progress in terms of these NATO defense and fifth generation air fighters? Thank you.
Well, I think that the Turkish-U.S. relationship is, going to be very good. I mean, look at the relationship between Trump. Our foreign policy is President Trump for now. And of course, Ozan Hoja, let's see the point that the next election that we have is for the House of Representatives, the Senate, part of the Senate in 2026.
Yes.
If the Republicans lose the House, because they have a very small majority, then Trump will be, first thing they're going to do, the Democrats, if they win, is they're going to start impeaching Trump again. If they start doing that, they've already talked about it, because he had this war and it's not constitutional and all of that, which is not true, by the way. It's perfectly constitutional. We can do another talk about that. It's unclear in the Constitution, President's commander-in-chief, Congress declares war. Now, now the point is that right now, Turkey has a great friend, at least President Erdogan, with Trump. Turkey has President Erdogan has a friend. President Trump has complimented President Erdogan. But I think the one area which is of concern is this multitasking that Turkey is doing with China and Russia.
Yeah.
And wanting now say it's a concern, but I also think it's a strength. And I'll tell you why my concern and why I think it's a strength. Look, who could believe that Turkey, a member of NATO, which participated in NATO actions, participated in ISAF, participates in NATO, is also involved with the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, wants to join, it's affiliated. And whenever, people are looking at this, they're scratching their heads and they're saying, I'm Lemiorum. I don't understand this. How is this possible? But Turkey has been able to be a supporter of Ukraine, right? Yet not cutting its, no sanctions against Russia, but still supportive of Ukraine. And no one else is able to do that. So Turkey is very good at multitasking, I think, and it's able to multitask, maybe because it's so bifurcated in Avrupa and Asia. It's a multi-personality state, so it's able to reach out to different directions and different alliances. That's a very good thing. But at the same time, going back to in Congress, there is some sentiment about Turkey being in NATO, and why does Turkey do what it does? Because it's a NATO member. So that is a source of, I think, concern, but at the same time, the multitasking could be a strength if it is used for the purpose of strengthening the alliance between Turkey and the United States. But branching out, and to my mind, I think I'm very, very clear on this. I understand why reaching out to China is perhaps this, of course, an approach, but reaching out to China is not valuable, in my opinion, China as an ally. And as far as Russia is concerned, same issue. But again, these are problems for the Turkish regime to resolve. The perspective from the U.S. is perplexed by this and trying to understand why Turkey is not straight along the NATO path and why are you diverging and doing that. And Turkey has always pursued its national interests, and perceives its national interest is developing not only trade, but also sorts of all relations with all countries around the world. So I would say that right now we have, it's a sanguine and optimistic, I think, view of Turkish-U.S. relations, particularly because of President Trump. But at the same time, nurturing the relationships with Congress is very, very important, and has been the main issue. And it's also, lastly, the question of perception. Now, as an expert in this field, that perception is equally or more important than reality. Yeah. And so how is Turkey perceived in the United States? How is it perceived in Congress? Is really, really important. How is this perception evaluated by our policy leaders? And that is very, very important. And you also have to realize that in the Trump administration, we've seen it on Iran, there's a dividing of different opinions. Even in the MAGA world of Trump, there's division of opinion. Even on this Iran attack, some of them said, no good, isolationist, okay, we should do it, support Israel, all the things we talked about. So I think that, Turkey's position, I would like to say, this our last thoughts here, just to say, I hope there will be peace in the world, peace in the region, That's all my optimistic view. But I also hope and pray that the very good relationship between Turkey and Israel will once again be rekindled and working together. I think these two countries are so significant in the region that combining their forces, and again, the relationship in the past, we've had our ups and downs, and right now we have a very difficult and very problematic relationship between Turkey and Israel, very much so. But even so, I'm going to be an optimist despite everything and hope that these issues that we talked about can be resolved and that Turkey and Israel will once again improve their relationship. Certainly, I would urge for a détente, which was, kind of Kissingerian approach, lowering the tension. Maybe not an entente, but I would love a détente because I think that Turkey and Israel as great powers should be working together and for the future of the world and the region. So that is my hope and prayer for the future. And I hope it'll come true. And a large part of that will hinge on what happens with Iran, I think, also. Because if this Iran situation continues to fester and there's more war there, then we're not going to ever have a chance to see clearly to work together. So that's my prayer and my hope. Inshallah, there will be peace for the region, for the world, Turkey and Israel, Turkey-U.S., and all of the nations of the world will be peaceful. I think you agree with me, at least in part. Okay.
Sure, Mark. I mean, of course, since Turkey started to have problems with the U.S., Israel, etc., of course, unfortunately, the transformation of the country from a European-leaning democracy into a different kind of state has directed us to understand, realize the importance of American values, democracy, liberalism, free market, and similar countries around us. In that sense, I'm quite hopeful about the future. President Erdogan, opposition parties, they both respect and understand the value of democracy and human rights. So let's hope that Israel will also contribute to regional peace. Iran will also contribute, and there'll be a time of progress starting from this year. And this will be maybe the best gift to President Trump and President Erdogan. Then they'll be remembered as peace presidents, and maybe
they'll give them the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, even Nobel Prize. Yeah, Pakistan mentioned this as for President Trump.
Good.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Why? I'm a dreamer. Yes.
Very good.
Okay, Mark. I'm such a dreamer. I know. Okay, Mark. For the next time, let's hope we'll discuss more peaceful issues about Turkey. Maybe President Trump's visit or President Erdogan's Washington visit.
Yes. That should be very, very, very interesting. Very interesting. Looking forward to that very much.
And what I understand from your thoughts is that Turkey definitely needs a strong lobbying force in the DC because it definitely lacks such force. I mean, in the old days, there was maybe a Jewish lobby support, but now Turkey doesn't have too much power over the US Congress, which is the missing part, I guess.
Well, I think, constituents is the key and going to do what all the different groups do, which is to go to Congress and tell their story. And that's exactly how the system works. And, our congressmen are very, very receptive to their constituents. So go and talk to Congress and explain to them why you have a particular point of view. But I do think that, and I hope and pray better times are ahead. And if President Trump, if hopefully the House, I'm going to say personally, Benja, I hope the House and the Senate remain the way they are so Trump can continue doing what he's doing in his own peace process in the region and in the world. So hopefully it will continue because otherwise it'll be deflected and he will not be able to do so.
And there is one Turkish NBA player, Alperen Şengün. Mark, please follow him. He's such talent. He's such a talent, and he's doing fine in Houston Rockets. So maybe he'll be the symbol of new Turkish-American partnership.
Right. We love our athletes and our NBA players, and we wish success to him. We say iyi şanslar, and may you win. May you have many balls in the basket.
Okay, thank you, Mark. See you later. Have a good day.
Thank you very much for the privilege of doing this.